The world needs to know about our history. Before we can tell others who we are, we need to know who we are.
What's at stake if we don't keep these stories alive is we lose our past. Our values do not change as Choctaw. I'm afraid that if we lose our language, we lose our storytelling, we lose all those things, we forget who we are as people. And so that's the reason why it's important to keep the stories alive. The Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma today is a thriving tribe. In Oklahoma, we're not on a reservation. We have what's called checkerboarded state. However, though, one of the things that to me is critical is that we do not forget who we are as people, the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And that's the reason why we focus so much on our culture today.
The Artist Leadership Program at the National Museum of the American Indian is an opportunity for Native artists to get into the collections of the museum, conduct a research, receive arts management training, do some public programs, and then to come back home and share that experience, that information with their community. I think there are several reasons why Sarah's proposal was recommended for the Artist Leadership Program. And I think a lot of it has to deal with the potential impact that it could do for the Choctaw Nation.
I wrote my first story when I was about 5 years old, before I could even write incomplete sentences. What inspires me in writing Choctaw stories today is what was passed down to me through my family, especially my mom, and through her dad, my papa. He always told her to be proud that she was Indian. We would go to the Five Tribes Conference and elders would share these beautiful stories, and I would think, you know, who's writing these stories down so that the generations to come after us will be able to read them and remember them. I went to Washington, D.C. this past fall in 2012 and had the opportunity to go to the National Museum of the American Indian Cultural Resources Center. We got to go back into the vaults and actually put on gloves and handle Choctaw artifacts over 100 years old. One in particular that I remember, a drum, thinking that it was probably made in a boarding school and just imagining the little boy who made it. You're not just reading about facts and figures in 1, 2, 3. It actually brings a story to life. The title of my workshop is Historical Fiction, Preserving Choctaw Removal Stories. And the purpose of the workshop was to give these writers the sensory details that I've discovered in Washington, D.C., and also pass on my knowledge and experience with fiction writing. One of the goals of the workshop is to allow them an opportunity to submit Choctaw removal stories for publication in an anthology that I'm compiling. A published book that will then reach out beyond the Choctaw Nation into the mainstream audience to help educate people through entertainment about the Choctaw culture.
One reason I need to write about the history of my family is because my children have asked questions. They've heard a lot of them growing up. I'm the last one of my family who remembers a lot of these anecdotal stories and true stories about the family, the Choctaw family.
I know in my own family, so much of our heritage has just been lost, and I left to learn about my Native American culture through other families because it hasn't been passed down in my family as well. So I think it's very important to pass it on.
Well, there's a lot of emphasis on multicultural books right now for children, but there are not a lot on Native Americans that I've noticed. So that's what I'm here for.
It's remarkable to hear, especially when Sarah was talking about like her own realization of her family's connection to the removal. I imagine that we all have that experience, and to hear that from people of all ages and backgrounds within this group is pretty powerful. This workshop I know is going to impact my writing because just seeing the energy of people working on this part of our history as Choctaw people, that's impacting me and inspiring me to get to work.
The world needs to know about our history. Before we can tell others who we are, we need to know who we are. We need to reconnect, and we need to get our stories down so that we could tell who we are.
Even if we have a Choctaw that's 1/1,000,000th, they need to understand that's what makes them Choctaw, not because of the color of their skin, but what our culture and our history is all about.
I think the overall impact of Sarah's project will be in the stories that come in the future. When one of the artists, or one of the writers left, she looked at me in the eye and says, "Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, because I haven't written in so long, and now I want to write."
One of my favorite quotes is in an article by Jack Pages, where he wrote, "The weakest ink lasts longer than the most powerful memory." Yakoki.